Welcome to Chapter 4, everybody. And in this lecture, we are going to talk about variability. And the fancy way of saying that is we're going to talk about measures of dispersion. Now, before I give you kind of a little preview about what we're going to talk about in the next roughly 45 minutes, I want you to look at this particular slide in front of you. And let's talk about why this slide might represent variability or a measure of dispersion. So if we look at these fish, we see that they're all different shapes, they're all different sizes, they're all different colors. They likely weigh different, well, they would weigh differently. Some of them are probably benign, and others might be very, very dangerous. I don't know if I see any piranhas in here, but they're different from each other. Some are male, some are female. Again, there's a lot of, what's the V word? Variability, right? So when we talk about things being variable, all we're saying is that they're different, right? They're different from each other. And whether we're talking about fish or numbers, it's the same concept. Fish can be variable, numbers can be variable. So in this chapter, we're going to talk about variability in numbers. And we're going to talk about the different ways that we have of measuring variability in a data set. And I'm going to explain what it means to say that a data set is dispersed. Okay, so you'll understand why we call this measures of dispersion in just a little bit. All right, but for now, all you have to appreciate is that numbers can be variable just like fish can be variable, and it's actually helpful for us as researchers to have a number that tells us how variable a data set is. All right, so buckle up, here we go. So measures of dispersion refers to variability. And for the life of me, I no longer remember why I have Goofy in here. I cannot for the life of me remember, but anyways, it's kind of a fun little cartoon to look at. All right, so what is a definition for variability? One number is used to describe how variable, that means how different, scores are in a set of data. So much like the mean was a number to describe a typical or representative number from a larger data set, here again we're trying to come up with one number to describe how variable the numbers in that data set happen to be. And so let's go through some examples here. If we had a data set with the numbers 13, 13, 13, 13, 13, 13, and no, nothing bad has happened to me. Don't know how many times I've described this data set, and so much for the superstition that 13 is an unlucky number. Anyways, if we look at this data set, we can clearly see that there's no variability, right? All the numbers equal 13. So if we were to come up with a number, one number to describe the variability, what number should that be? How about 0? Right? There's no variability here. So we're just going to say variability equals 0. And that tells us that all the numbers are the same. What if we had 12, 13, 11, 13, 11, 12? Well, now we're beginning to see a little bit of variability here. Not a lot, right? There's not a ton of variability, but there's some. So if we wanted to come up with one number to describe variability in this data set, well, it shouldn't be 0, right? Because there's some variability, but the number should be a pretty small number and positive, because what would it mean to have negative variability? That doesn't make any sense. So it would be a positive number, and it would be a very small number, and that indicates just a little bit of variability. And so now if you have the data set 12, 45, 2, 1, 23, 22, and 15, clearly we can see that variability is going up. There's a lot more variability in this data set.
So what should happen to our number? The number that we're going to use to represent variability. It should go up, right? We should get a bigger number as we begin to see the numbers become more variable. Our estimate of variability should also go up. And so this then becomes the challenge. How do we calculate a number to represent variability? Now, there are many different ways to measure variability. I'm going to talk about 4 ways, but I'm going to find fault with 3 of the 4 ways. The first way is not too bad, but there's a lot of faults. The second way is really bad. The third way is pretty good, but it has a little fault. And the fourth way is the best way to do it. Now, you might be asking yourself, why do we have to learn a couple of mediocre ways, a really crappy way, only to get to the one good way that almost all of us use? And the answer to that is that by understanding all the other ways, it will help you understand the final and best way to measure variability. All right. So sometimes you have to learn what not to do to fully appreciate what you should be doing. Okay. So the 4 measures of variability we're going to cover are range, absolute mean deviation, standard deviation, and variance.